Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining our webinar on the next normal consumer shopping trends for 2021. I wanted to let you know that there will be a Q&A at the end of the session, so please send your questions via the Q&A function throughout the webinar, and we'll do our best to answer as many as we can. Lastly, a recording will also be made available on demand following the event. All right, let's get to it. We're very fortunate to have two experts join us today. Klarna's Chief Marketing Officer, David Sandstrom, who has been instrumental in leading the company's transformation from a fintech firm to become a lifestyle brand since joining in 2017. Today, he's responsible for everything related to design, PR, communication, and brand. We also have Mr. Porter's Global Marketing Director, Sabah Nakashbandi, who has overseen the luxury retailer's marketing strategy since 2013, taking it from a startup to become a leading men's online style destination globally. Sabah oversees all elements of marketing and champions Mr. Porter's brand and customer experience. And I'm Katie Chitrakorn, and I cover the retail and marketing beats for Vogue Business. Welcome both. Thank you so much for coming here.
Thanks for having us.
It's great to have you both, and today we'll explore how the pandemic has affected consumer behavior, mood, and spending patterns, and we'll also discuss how brands and retailers can position themselves to support consumers throughout this uncertain period, as well as look forward to where demand will shift. So David, I wanted to start with you because Klarna has been built on the concept of giving consumers a way to buy things online without having to pay for them upfront. I'm curious to hear what impact the pandemic had on Klarna's business, and also, what were the big changes in consumer purchase behavior that emerged?
So a lot of things have happened in the last 18 months, obviously. The obvious answer is that we've seen an accelerated digitalization of everything, of businesses, of our partners and merchants, which essentially has mean to a large extent an unparalleled transfer of GMV. Many retailers and brands have been forced to offset the loss in GMV that they've had in store with their e-commerce business, and some of our partners have been equipped to do that, and for many of them it has been a shock. So for us as a business, I mean, we have seen tremendous growth in this age of digitalization. We were on a good trajectory before, but I mean, what we've seen in the last in the last years, in the last 18 months, has been astonishing on that end. What we've also seen is that many of our partners weren't really ready for the increased focus on consumer experience, taking their e-commerce business from being a purely transactional platform into becoming something more, where consumers demand more, where they want more experiences, more content, more inspiration, more discovery, more fashion, basically. And that is an area and a space that we've moved into very quickly as well. And then finally, I want to call out that what we've also seen, which is interesting, is that many new segments or many new target audiences have been introduced to e-commerce and online shopping. So the biggest growth for us has been in the segment 55 plus. My mom, for example, has been forced to buy groceries online. She wouldn't have done that pre-pandemic, but now she is a fan of online grocery shopping. So, I mean, a lot of things have happened. A lot of bad things have happened during the pandemic, but also there are a couple of really interesting and good things that have come out of this.
And certainly, physical retail was hit hard over the past year. Stores were forced to close. As you touched on, David, most people were, forced to shift online. And Mr. Porter has the advantage of being an online retailer. So Sabah, I'm really interested to hear what impact the pandemic had on Mr. Porter, and what kind of shift you saw in consumer spend.
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot of shared themes with what David just mentioned. So while the majority of shoppers reported a reduced spend on luxury and designer fashion in 2020, a real opportunity emerged for online retailers to capture the remaining spend. And I think we also saw bricks and mortar stores, even when they reopened, losing appeal. And so as an e-commerce business, Mr. Porter was really well positioned to really capitalize on that demand. And then I think there were quite a few notable shifts across our business as a result of the pandemic, but I'll focus really on two. I think the first was that we saw an explosion of new customers, and this was consistent across all our markets. And so, as David mentioned, the pandemic really accelerated that online shopping and shifting customer behavior. And if you weren't already online, you evolved into an online shopper this year. But what was really interesting for me, and what's been really fascinating, is seeing that there's been this disproportionate growth in categories like luxury watches, where historically e-commerce adoption has been slower. And actually for Mr. Porter, this is a category where we're seeing hyper growth right now, and we're planning to capitalize this and expand our fine jewelry proposition too. I think, the second impact of note for us was that we saw an increased editorial engagement. And our purpose at Mr. Porter has always been to encourage our audiences to explore stylish and more fulfilling ways of living. And we really see ourselves much more than an e-commerce platform. Our content really has been at the heart of our service proposition. And so during COVID, we really saw how important that was. We wanted to be there for our audiences. We wanted to be there for our customers. We wanted to support them during incredibly difficult times. And I think to David's point, it was also about being really sensitive to the context. So we had the opportunity at the very onset of the pandemic to lean into our men's mental health and content and fundraising initiative, which is called Mr. Porter Health in Mind. This was actually, it was launched back in 2019, and the aspiration back then was to raise the conversation around men's mental health and physical well-being. And we've done loads of initiatives over the past couple of years, everything from launching our own book, The Mr. Porter Guide to a Better Day, to launching some incredible capsules. Actually, there's one just that's recently launched this week, and during the COVID lockdown, we really pivoted our digital content strategy to amplify our health in mind messaging. There was lots of activity from an at-home editorial and social series, and this was all about us, thinking about being there for our audiences and providing a service, whether it was kind of entertaining or advising or just generally supporting them through the crisis. So we were quite uniquely placed in that respect, in terms of being able to leverage our content as well as our commerce proposition.
Thank you, Seva. Lots to unpack there that we'll definitely come back to and discuss some more. But one thing I wanted to discuss with you both is there's been a lot of discussion around revenge shopping. It's a term that's used to refer to, shopping extravagantly to overcome frustration. If you look it up in a Collins dictionary, they compare it to getting a chance to party after not being able to for many months. But I'm curious to hear from you both, to what extent is this really happening, and can this spurt in spending really, can it really be expected post the lockdown period?
I personally wouldn't call it revenge shopping. I think we've seen two very different mindsets emerge quite strongly on Mr. Porter. The first is really about customers shifting their priorities, and they're looking much more for investment pieces that they can keep for the long term. And actually we've done some of our own internal research, and we've seen actually it's up to 80% of our customers have become more interested in timeless pieces that they can wear for many seasons to come versus just fashion kind of trend driven pieces. And I think this really speaks to that new mindset of people wanting to seek greater value for their money, but also this stronger appreciation of craftsmanship, and also an increased focus on sustainable purchases and choosing retailers who are positively kind of contributing to society. I think the second mindset is, despite that very sensible investment approach, throughout the pandemic, we've also seen this desire for escapism. I think we can all empathize here. And actually on Mr. Porter, the number one reason to visit our site was the desire to treat myself. And we've seen that since the end of lockdown, pretty much everywhere in the world. What's been quite interesting is we've been observing customers buying higher priced items, and they're treating themselves, they're going out again, and there's a real genuine excitement to dress up. We had 2 exclusive capsule collections from Dries Van Noten and Tom Ford. Both collections were super inspired by escapism and travel, and they were very bright, positive, and colorful. And I think, you know, that they've done incredibly well. And I think that's the consumer mindset right now. Everyone's got that appetite for dressing in special and intentional ways, and there's that hunger for vibrancy.
I mean, we've seen the same thing, and what makes it really interesting to work at Klarna is, I mean, we have unique insight into 90 million consumers' spending behavior and purchases, right, across retailers, across brands, across segments. So looking at the data, we found just so interesting data points throughout the pandemic, where it started out with, you know, a high degree of uncertainty, people buying a lot of essentials. I don't even know if you remember, but people actually thought that toilet paper would run out. We saw that in the purchase behavior. After a while, we increasingly saw that people got bored. They got bored with lockdown, a vast majority. So we saw a surge in computer games and board games and things like that. That then, you know, transformed into people getting settled in, a lot of loungewear, a lot of fitness things, a lot of skincare was sold. I think what we're seeing now, the 4th phase we're moving into, is not so much about revenge, but as Sabo said, like, it's about treating yourself. We see luxury surging, we see travel coming back, we see people wanting to get entertained, getting out there, getting dressed up. So we've seen these phases throughout our data, and I don't think it's so much about revenge. I think it's about, you know, happiness, spring, like the feeling of spring again, just coming out, being with friends, being entertained, getting a chance to getting dressed up. So revenge is I think it's the wrong word.
Yeah, that makes sense. But one thing for sure is that, you know, 2021 will be a year of transition for brands. You know, over the past year, the lines between home and office have blurred. People's homes doubled as an office, a classroom, and a gym, and everything else. And we also know that 70% of consumers said that they plan to dress more casually when they return to work and other activities. This is data that's come from NPD. I'm curious to know, what are you seeing at Mr. Porter in terms of consumer purchases? What are shoppers investing in? You talked about these investment pieces.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned people wanting to dress more casually. We're seeing our casual wear and contemporary departments really booming. And we know from our research that formal styles are unlikely to regain appetite in the short term. Actually, it's as high as 1 in 2 customers saying that they have no intention to purchase formal workwear this year, whereas by contrast, there is this real demand to buy casual workwear. But it's interesting because there are some nuances. So, for example, if you look at tailoring, we have seen an increase in sales. However, it's much more relaxed. So customers very much adopting for deconstructed online suits. They're moving away from the classic suit, and I think this is definitely reflecting that trend to more casual dress. But as I mentioned, we are seeing customers purchase timeless investment pieces, and that's kind of reinforced by the growth we've seen with luxury watches, but also we have our own label, Mr. P, and that launched back in 2017. It's now rocketed to become one of our top 10 brands. And this is a brand that is very modern, casual. It's a casual contemporary line, and it's our basic view of like an expert edit of elevated, high quality wardrobe essentials and future classics, but it's all very wearable. And it's done incredibly well in this new context because our customers are looking for that high quality product that is built to last. And is, as I said, kind of more wearable. You can dress it up, you can dress it down. So we anticipate our own label, Mr. P, is really going to continue to grow from strength to strength.
And another shift that we saw over the past year was that several customers relocated, and I wonder if that's something you also saw with your customer base in some areas of the world. And how do you adjust your content or your offering to reach these audiences?
Yeah, I think this is definitely a trend we all experienced. I think we even experienced it ourselves. Lots of people moving from the big cities into the home counties, and if you're lucky enough to move to the countryside. And so, we saw some interesting trends on Mr. Porter. So, for example, we noticed many of our customers relocating outside of New York City to locations like Long Island, New Jersey, and as actually we saw our Florida business and our California business do really well. And in response to this trend, we expanded some of our what used to be a seasonal service offering in the Hamptons to a year-round proposition, because we saw that a lot of people were remaining in the Hamptons. So this was one element. We also expanded our Premier service to a lot more places. So it was, I think, an additional 50 zip codes across 6 major counties in the US. And, this was all about, being there with our customers, giving them that service where they were. But I think, generally speaking, as an online business, we're also in a very fortunate position that we really can be wherever our customers are.
Absolutely. And David, I would love to come back to you because, as we were saying, everyone's going online. So omni-channels become increasingly important and businesses have been forced to become more competitive. What were the biggest changes that you saw in the digital payment space?
I think I would like to call out like the merge of entertainment, content curation, and the actual purchase. I think historically we've seen all of these things when you look at discovery, price comparison, and the actual purchase. All of those things and reviews, they have happened on separate platforms and on separate sites. I think what we've seen and what we're going to see in an accelerated manner going forward is the merge of entertainment and shopping. Especially if we look to the east, what is happening in China, there it's obviously on a completely different level than what we've seen. But a lot of our partners have moved into the space of, call it live shopping or shopping entertainment, whatever you want to call it, but that kind of content where you connect on a different level. Again, I think e-commerce traditionally has been, if we're fairly boring. I think the content created around the fashion is interesting, but the e-commerce platforms are fairly boring. I mean, it's a picture of a garment, it's a picture of a pair of sneakers, and then you pay for those sneakers and you get them sent home. There's no social aspect of it. There is no entertainment value. There's no going in depth. There's no storytelling. I think what Mr. Porter has done in this space is fantastic. It is fantastic, but it's still, I would argue that it's still only just the beginning. What is going to be added in terms of entertainment, the FOMO aspect, the ability to talk to your peers that have the same sweater or something like that. That is a space that is still unexplored. I think you're way ahead of your peers when it comes to content creation and storytelling and everything you do around that. But there are still levels to be had here, in my opinion.
Absolutely agree.
But are you also seeing significant differences in generations and cohorts and how they respond to these different trends?
Yeah, but obviously, I mean, there is a before and after TikTok, at least in our world, if we're being honest, when it comes to that. And for us, if I take one step back and look at our core business, it is very much about trust. And what we're seeing, and the same thing goes for fashion. It doesn't only go for payment companies and banks. For fashion is a lot about trust and a lot about, that says who has the clout within fashion, right? And what we've seen, especially what differs between maybe not generations, but between different mindsets, is how this trust is built, right? For not a younger generation, but for one generation, trust is really built through your peers, through influencers, through TikTok, through authenticity. And for others, trust is built in a different and more classic way. And that has actually affected us. And I do think a lot of our partners and merchants are still soul searching quite a bit here. Like, how can you build trust by basically outsourcing your brand to third-party creators? Like, it's a new world. And I think that is really interesting. But it's also, it's different between, young CMOs and older CMOs, like how you approach that space. I think it's highly interesting what we're seeing right now.
Absolutely. And while there's still a lot of uncertainty in the short term, preparing for longer term consumer behavior changes is important now if companies are to capitalize on future opportunities. So, out of the changes that we've discussed, I'm curious to hear from you both which you expect will be long lasting and what are the reasons for that.
I'm happy to take this one first, if you want, David. I mean, for me, I think there's going to be an absolute increased focus and scrutiny, and quite rightly, around corporate and social responsibility. And I think there's going to be a much stronger expectation from our customers, for brands and for businesses and for business leaders to drive positive change. And I think specifically in our industry of fashion and luxury, there are two areas that are just going to become so important, and I know they've been discussed at length: sustainability and inclusion. So I think with regards to sustainability, I think customers increasingly expect retailers and brands to guide them in shopping more sustainably, and I feel at Mr. Porter, we've always felt we've got this deep responsibility towards our community, our industry, and planet to continuously commit to improving our journey and our practices. And we really want to empower a much more conscious and a much more considered customer journey. We know there's an appetite to kind of have this more sustainable living with our customers, but we also know that there needs to be more guidance for consumers to move up that sustainability scale from thinking about it, intention, and into action. And that requires the right education and the right shopping experience. And actually, I'm really excited because on Monday, we're going to be announcing the craftsmanship code on Mr. Porter. And this is a big deal for us. Yes, it's a new section on the site, which is designed to champion products made by brands that have a positive contribution to their communities and that operate within environmental and social considerations and have responsibility at the forefront. But actually, the introduction of this craftsmanship code really marks Mr. Porter's long-term commitment to champion artisanal product and skilled craft within not just its current buying strategy, but its future buying strategy. And it's really about celebrating investment pieces and product that has time, skill, care at every stage of the production. And this is something we know has a lot of value to our customers. It's something that customers will want to invest in, and we hope that they love and care for that, and it will have more value over time and can be worn for longer. I think also with that, you're going to see a whole amazing capsule collection called A Small World, where you see this amazing offering of very kind of diverse, interesting, highly curated independent brands which celebrate craftsmanship. So I'm really keen everyone looks out for that on Monday. But just going back as well to the second topic, which is one I honestly feel very passionate about, is this piece around diversity and inclusion. And I think, let's be honest, we've seen with COVID how the gaps and the disparity in society is getting much bigger. And while at Mr. Porter we've championed inclusivity, I think we have an opportunity to do more. And so, back in April, our teams really worked up an initiative which we're very proud of, and it's called Mr. Porter Futures. I personally think it's a uniquely ambitious design and business mentorship program, because it not only targets talent outside the fashion mainstream, which has which is a powerful example for the industry at large, but it proactively addresses the historical issues around access, network, and investment from the very start. So it really looks at the full value chain of the business. And our goal is very much to discover original talent. It could be someone retired in Russia or a student in Somalia, but they don't need to have any experience. They just need to have passion. They need to have creativity, and we want to kind of introduce and platform their work on a global stage. So applications actually just completed recently, and we've received I think over 77 countries, applications from so many different areas. And we're really excited about this journey we're about to go on.
Oh, wonderful. David, what are you seeing from your end in terms of the shifts or the trends that will be long lasting?
I mean, Saba's onto something, maybe the most important thing when it comes to sustainability. And I just want to build on that shortly, which is we're really seeing a surge in secondhand and upcycling and all of those trends within that as well. So I do think, regardless of what kind of business you have, I think you need to think more circular around, like, how do you connect all the dots? And again, the secondhand or pre-owned, or however we frame it, is going to be huge in the next couple of years. Then there are a couple of more things. I think the personalization aspect needs to be elevated, especially within e-commerce. I think there is tons of data, there's tons of competence, but the way that data is applied in practice is not good enough yet. I don't think the online e-commerce experience is good enough, and whoever does that better than the others is going to be a winner. Then we have the convenience aspect of things. I do think, like, if e-commerce is going to become the main channel for people to actually buy things and interact with brands, there is still loads to be done when it comes to convenience, ranging everything from pre-purchase to the purchase to the returns management. There's just lots and lots of work to be done. And then finally, I want to call out again the community thinking around e-commerce. I think the ones that can not only connect their brands with people, but people with people, are really going to be winners going forward. Because I do think, especially in certain categories, like shopping is not a transaction, it is an interest. Like, people want to connect with their peers on that interest. They want to talk about things. They want to feel like part of a community. And we've only seen the beginning of that as well. So I do think the winners are going to be very strong within the community thinking.
Is there going to be a change in terms of the future of payments as well, given the events of the past year?
I do think, like the first step, in my opinion, is to create really consumer-friendly and sustainable payments. In all fairness, payments sound trivial, but historically, if you look at credit cards or other forms of payment, they're fairly consumer unfriendly. They're to some extent predatory when it comes to hidden fees and APRs and things like that. So the first part is just to create and offer payments that are sustainable from a business model perspective. Once that is done, in my opinion, I do think payments should move to the back end. We're now talking a lot about payments because the current space is inconvenient and it's consumer unfriendly. But within very soon, hopefully, I think that shouldn't be a question anymore.
Mm-hmm. And now we look forward. I'd love to hear from you both, what's next. And maybe we can start with you, Sabah. You've touched on a few exciting initiatives that will be launching on Monday and also more forward-looking. But really, what should brands, or what is Mr. Porter investing in to really ensure that they deliver on, the retail and marketing experience that consumers want?
Sure. I think there's a few areas. I think every business needs to be investing in their data capabilities and their teams. That's about being able to better know and understand your customers. That allows you to better connect with them more deeply and authentically. I mean, that's marketing 101. So for us, insight continues to power a lot of what we're doing. But secondly, kind of linking to building that closer connection with customers and increasing that brand relevance, particularly for a global business like ours, with our size and scale. Localization and what David mentioned, personalization, are fundamental. And on localization, we've done a lot with regards to improving our operational service proposition. We've expanded into more markets with our same day proposition, our premier delivery. We've expanded our personal shopping network across more cities. We've got new teams in offices. Dubai is going to be a big focus. Middle East is going to be a big focus, and we've got a team in Dubai. So localization is one piece, and then personalization kind of ties into that, and I think that's going to be particularly key for customer retention, and with also younger audiences. We've seen from our research a much stronger appetite here, and we're doing a lot, which I think a lot of e-commerce businesses are doing, which is focusing on powered by data marketing, from product recommendations to orchestrating our customer journeys cross-channel. But I do think one big thing I like to flag with data and insight, it's really important not to forget to think about our customers as people first. And when we talk about connecting with audiences, I think it's about not forgetting that human aspect. And I think that's where also values come into play. And that's why we're putting so much focus on sustainability. We're putting so much focus on craftsmanship. David mentioned community, culture, inclusivity. So I think, it's really important, it's not all science. And we work certainly in fashion in a business which is part art. And that's what makes it beautiful. That's what makes it wonderful. And what's interesting is actually over the pandemic, we've seen how our customers have valued that one-to-one human touch, and our personal shopping service, which we offer to our top clients, is become even more popular than ever. And I think this is going to only be an area that we continue to strengthen.
Thank you, Sabah. David, what's next for Klarna? What can we expect this year, or what is the company investing in?
I mean, we're investing in so many different things. It would take me hours to go through everything, since we're expanding to new markets, into new segments. So there's loads going on. But once again, I would like to highlight the fact that I truly, and this is going to sound very shallow, obviously, but I truly believe that we need to invest in content. And making content viable, because I do think that is the way to interact with people going forward. So we're putting huge efforts into basically viable content, call that live shopping for ourselves, or actually enabling distributed retailer, where we enable people to buy things regardless of platform. Right now, we see a lot of walled gardens when it comes to purchasing things, but really empowering people to buy and sell things regardless of that platform, really looking into the user-generated content piece around products, around storytelling. How can we inspire our 90 million consumers to be part of product reviews and content, and really demoing the products, because that is an aspect that e-commerce is still lacking. Like that feeling of walking into a store, feeling a product, looking at the product, seeing who else is in the store, and feeling some kind of confirmation from that. Like building those kind of capabilities into our product is huge, and then trying to distribute our product broadly, obviously.
Thanks, David. So to quickly summarize our conversation before we move on to the Q&As, as consumers turn to online shopping over the past year, retailers have had to step up their game, and we've seen categories like lifestyle, grooming, and more casual dressing enjoying a boost. But companies with core values that naturally aligned with their customer base also benefited. And Sabah, you talked about how shoppers were more purpose-driven, and they looked to invest in quality products. as e-commerce and digital experience are major priorities in 2021, but there's also a high correlation between consumer safety concerns and brand trust, which is something you discussed, David, and personalization, localization, and new retail channels like live shopping are also coming to the forefront as new formats. All right, we'll now move on to the Q&As from our audience. Bear with me while I get these up. The first question is, what would your advice be to brands that are planning on launching post-pandemic? This can be for either you, David, or Sabah.
I can take it, David, if you want.
Go ahead.
I think, I think what's really important is, and we've seen this with our own business, is you've got to have a plan for your staff as much as your consumers. And I think, having people at the heart of your strategy, both in the context of your talent and also in the context of your consumers is key. So I think my advice would be, don't take your talent for granted. And, especially with offices starting to open up, lockdowns easing, make sure that you're thinking about your talent. Your employees are people that are also impacted by the pandemic, because actually they're your most valuable asset. So if you have a plan for your employees, you have a plan for your business.
Another question that we have is, as a result of the past year, are there new concerns that weren't there before that customers have when shopping online that brands should be aware of and will need to prepare for?
I can take the, or a short answer would be, I don't think this is a new thing by any means, and Sabah has touched upon it a couple of times, but the increased demand for sustainability and knowing that you buy from fair brands with fair values is just going to accelerate. And we work with quite a lot of companies, older companies, that are now asking themselves, like, what the hell should we do within this space? So launching a new brand or accelerating your efforts post-pandemic, we see that, I think in our research, it showed that 70% of our consumers are going to be on the lookout for more sustainable, fairer, better valued brands. So that is really something to build into your strategy from the start, so that you don't have to, mend that in later on.
I was just going to add as well, I think, what's also happening is there's just so much more competition, and everybody has to be prepared for that. Like, lots of brands that hadn't digitized are moving online, and, people are, doing their research, they're comparing, they're contrasting. It's very easy to also kind of buy product, sometimes the same product from different places. So I think, being really clear on your brand's value proposition is a big one. And I think, David, you mentioned it, particularly when you're thinking about moving online, that trust piece, you can't take it for granted. And I think, trust and expertise, so expertise is one of our differentiating factors. That's really allowed us to kind of capitalize on like entering into new spaces, right? We've gone beyond fashion. We go into luxury watches now. We're going into, we're starting to really, go into new spaces, grooming, sportswear, homeware. And we've been able to do this because beyond even new categories, actually, I think even launching our own labels has proved it. We've been able to do this because people trust us, and we have a very strong brand value proposition, and people really respect that expertise and that authority. So I think, be aware, it's only going to get more competitive. So be clear on your brand value proposition.
Thanks, Sabah. I'll just go through one or two more. There's one question here on the impact on brand loyalty, and I'm also guessing it's because when you're online, consumers are spoiled from choice, and I wonder if you're seeing new expectations or shifts in consumer behavior in that sense.
I can take this one if you want, David, or do you want to?
I think we have. I'd love to hear your answer at least.
Yeah, I mean, it links to the point I just made, right? More competition, more choice, and I think customers are becoming a lot more demanding. You know, loyalty for sure is impacted, and I think, you know, there's two things here. How do you retain your high value customers? You need to be really investing in them, and you can't take for granted that they won't go anywhere else. So I think this is a big one for us in terms of constantly challenging ourselves to improve our service proposition, not to get complacent, to make sure we're improving things on that front. But I also think, you know, when it comes to loyalty generally, I think there's a piece around, you know, having you know, understanding that the kind of context is changing, and you know, for us, we're not just focusing on retention. We have to be thinking about acquisition as well in this context. And as I said, we've seen this amazing, you know, new customer growth. There's an opportunity to also build your base and you know, grow your business in different ways as well. So for me, there's the, you know, making sure you've got your services for your, you know, your top clients, but it's also about being that very friendly and inclusive place, and making people feel welcomed and part of the community. And I think, you know, that is equally as important now, particularly.
Yeah. Now, I was actually about to say that I'm not a huge believer in brand loyalty. I think that partly organizations get too complacent when they think about brand loyalty, and they stop thinking about growth. And also, if you just look at the data, the vast majority of companies, if not all companies, have their largest customer base within low frequency buyers, which basically means, like, regardless of what industry you look at, your customers are customers with your fiercest competitor as well. Then you obviously have a small, hardcore, loyal group. But I wouldn't think too much about brand loyalty. I think it's a constant fight for offering the best possible consumer experience, having the best possible consumer proposition, and working with that as a growth engine.
Agreed.
David, I'll just bring up one last question. We're getting quite a few here around working with creators and influencers. And I wondered, you know, what your opinion was on this. How should brands and retailers work with them going forward? Is it through kind of like organic paid content, an affiliate model? Where do you see things going next?
In all fairness, we're trying everything. If I would have the perfect recipe, I probably wouldn't share it here in the webinar either. But I think just allowing yourself to dip the company's toe into that space and see what works for you. Is it better with ambassadors? Is it better with micro-influencers? Is it better through affiliates? What works on each and different platforms? I think it's a highly, highly interesting space. And I do, like, over time, very few companies are going to be able to compete with their own content. I actually believe that Mr. Porter is one of those companies that can do, because the content has such high quality and is not niche, but it's very hard hitting within a specific space. For many other companies, I do think user-generated content, activating a user base, and working with that is key to what we do. And I think, I mean, this is nothing revolutionary, but we are moving into the age of creators. We see that every single platform is about creators, serving the creators. Most big brands work with creators. I think if you're not thinking about engaging with creators and creativity, I think you're losing out.
I was just going to make a point as well on this one, because I think it's such a big topic. But I think, you know, as David said, there's not just one set way of working with creators, and I think there's real interesting nuances regionally. There's interesting nuances when you think about channels. I think, you know, it all goes back to what is your objective, and you know, there's different objectives also sometimes driving how you work with creators. Is it to sell more? Is it about repositioning? Is it about reaching new audiences? Is it about creating amazing high quality content? That dictates you know, that dictates the approach you adopt with the creators in general.
Sure. Well, we are finally out of time. So I would like to, thank both our panelists for being here today. David, Sabah, thank you so much for sharing your insights.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you very much.
So a reminder for our viewers that this will be available to rewatch once we wrap up. But this is now the end of our webinar. Thank you to everyone who joined us.